and Rob McGregor welcome you to a place where all kinds of phenomena flourish. Voices whisper ancient secrets, signs and symbols are abundant. UFOs, ETs, ghosts, and even the dead move about freely. Here we meet authors, researchers, and investigators of the mysterious, the strange, and of the inexplicable anomalies that surround us. Step out of the everyday world and take a journey into the mystical underground.
Ready, we'll start in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Mystical Underground. Thank you for joining us. This is Trish McGregor and
Rob McGregor.
And our tech magician and producer, John Posey. He's the disembodied voice. You can go to the mysticalunderground.com where we make regular blog posts and where you can find out about our books. Among them are Phenomena, Harnessing Your Psychic Abilities, The Secrets of Spirit Communication, Sensing the Future and Aliens in the Backyard. Our latest book is called Mind-Blowing Synchronicities, the latest science, stories, and research. Trish's latest novel, White Crows, is White Crows, and Rob's most recent novel is called Tulpas, a story of mysterious beings created through deep meditation.
Okay, our guest today is Matthew McKay, who's a clinical psychologist, professor of psychology at Wright Institute. He's the co-founder of Haight Ashbury Psychological Services. He is founder of the Berkeley CBT Clinic and co-founder of the Bay Area Trauma Recovery Clinic, which serves low-income clients. He has authored and co-authored more than 40 books, including the Relaxation and Stress Reduction Workbook, Seeking Jordan, and his latest book we're going to talk about is Lessons from the Afterlife. Welcome, Matthew.
Glad to be with you.
You've been busy.
Yeah, sounds like you've been very busy. Yeah.
Rob, you could.
So let's start with Jordan, since he's a key player in this book and others by you. Tell us about him.
Well, Jordan was my son 15 years ago. He was almost 16 years ago now. He was on his way home from work, was accosted by 4 men. There was a huge fight, and he was, as he broke away from them, shot in the back, and he died on the street. And I guess what was true of me and is true of everyone who's lost someone they love deeply, and there's just a need to know, does that soul still exist? Mm-hmm. And are they okay? Wherever they are they okay? Are they in a good place? And so that was just a burning need for me. And so I sought him almost immediately. I went to mediums. I engaged in a process called induced after-death communication, which I could describe, Alan Botkin's process. I got involved in past life and life between life hypnosis. And then finally, I consulted Ralph Metzner, the late Ralph Metzner, who was a great spiritual teacher and someone who kind of specialized in the afterlife and after-death communication. And he taught me how to channel. Mm-hmm. Wow. And that changed everything, because now I could actually have conversations with Jordan. And from the first, it took him about an hour to teach me. And I went home that night and had my first conversation with Jordan. It was just a profound change. And I found that I could ask him anything. And because all souls in the afterlife have incredible wisdom. They have the knowledge of all their past lives, all of their experiences in the afterlife. All of that is part of their awareness. So when we check in with souls in the afterlife, they have unbelievable knowledge. And so he began sharing this with me, and it just answered my deepest questions and kind of blew my mind. Gave me.
I was reading your method for channeling, and you're saying that at the end of your book there, and it's quite detailed and it's interesting. You're saying that you don't have to be a medium or somebody with necessarily a lot of psychic abilities to be able to use this method and make contact?
That's right. I have no psychic ability whatsoever. I'm not clairaudient. And I've taught hundreds of people to channel, and almost everyone can. Um,
Huh.
so it's not something that's very complicated, and it's not something that requires some innate ability.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if your audience is interested, I can probably
Yeah.
teach them basics in 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, that would be
Definitely.
interesting.
Yeah,
But
it'd be fascinating.
I have a question first, though. How do people just learning separate real contact with self-deception of their own minds coming up with the answers?
That's really an important question. Well, what I found with Jordan was that, first of all, he communicated in a style that's very different from mine. And so when Jordan is channeling with me, he is talking in a way that's very much his way of speaking, of communicating, his choice of language. Um, and I can feel that it's fundamentally different.
Uh-huh.
But then the other thing is he says things to me, he tells me things that I had no knowledge of, absolutely no knowledge of, over and over and over again.
Wow.
He'll say things that are completely surprising to me, that are
Uh-huh.
well beyond my fund of knowledge. And so this is what happens with people is when they start channeling loved ones, and they ask questions, about the nature of the afterlife, or why are we here? Why do we come to this planet? They hear things that are well beyond their own experience and their own awareness. They're hearing things that are coming from the greater reality,
Mm-hmm.
and that begins to give you a sense over time, that you are going beyond your own limited awareness, and you're connected to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
what's this technique? I lost my sister last year, so I'm very interested in this technique.
Okay, well, it's pretty simple. I mean, the first thing is, get yourself a notebook, because channeling in the way I practice it, the way I was taught by Ralph, is something that's written. You
Uh-huh.
you write your questions down, you write your answers, the answers you get down. So you should have a notebook. The second thing you want to have is an object that connects you to the loved one on the other side. It could be something that belonged to them, something they gave to you, but it's an object. I mean, and even a photograph. I mean, something that connects you to them. And then to begin the process, it's just a ritual, and it starts with eye fixation. Candle works great,
Uh-huh.
just for holding your attention and your eye focus. Then you begin a kind of a simple Vipassana breath-based meditation. There are other ways to get into channeling. I mean, you can use hypnosis, you can use even prayer, but the technique that Ralph taught me is basically a Vipassana meditation, where you bring your attention down to your diaphragm, to your breath. Your awareness is all centered there. You note the breath. In each out breath, you count one, and then the next one two, and the next one three, and so forth up to 10. Then you can repeat. So you're just simply noticing your breath, noting each out breath, and then when thoughts arise, you bring your attention very gently back to the breath. So thoughts will always show up, but we then bring our attention back to the breath. So the idea is to just kind of keep with the Vipassana meditation. It doesn't usually take long. It's a few minutes usually, to get sort of calm and slow your mind down and get into a receptive state. I mean, really, we know that meditation is an altered state. So it literally is an altered state that we drop into. And the next thing Ralph taught me was simply to focus on or imagine an orb right above your head, the color of the sun. And as you're aware of that orb, also be thinking about your loved one and how much you love them. And the sense of love is sort of the connection. It really is what opens the channel. And then visualize the orb just elongating into essentially a brilliant lit tube that goes all the way to your loved one. Once that is there and you've visualized that, write your first question down. Literally write it down in the book. And the writing is also part of a altered state. Watching the words form on the page
Uh-huh.
is part of keeping that channel open. And so after you write down, just wait a minute and then write the first thing that shows up in your awareness, the first thing that shows up in your mind. Even if it's a couple of words, it makes no sense, doesn't matter. Just write down whatever shows up. And our minds are never empty. So the first thing that shows up, write it down. Wait a minute, something more will show up. Write that down, and just keep writing until you kind of get to the end of that particular subject. And the experience of channeling comes in different ways. Sometimes it comes as a download where you just get all this awareness and there aren't even any words for it. You have to go find the words. It's this complete concept that you have to discover language to somehow make sense of, or
Mhm.
sometimes it comes as a very intense stream of awareness of words. Sometimes it's hard even to keep up with the stream. Sometimes it comes just as very isolated few words that have a lot of impact and intensity. Sometimes it just comes as an image, a picture. So the answer will come in different ways, but our job then is to simply write down a description of whatever we get, or whatever are the exact direct words
Uh-huh.
we get. And then when you've reached an end of that particular moment of communication, write your next question, and you can continue until you feel you're finished, until you feel like you've done enough for that moment.
Yeah.
Well, how
That's
does Jordan describe the afterlife? Has he
yeah.
done that?
He's I described it at great length in a book called Luminous Landscape of the Afterlife. And what he says is that, there are different aspects to the afterlife. The one is what happens just outside the afterlife, the landing place where we go and we get used to not having a physical body. We get used
Uh-huh.
to seeing in 360. We get used to moving by intention and not by muscle. um, we get used to when we think about something or visualize something in our mind to noticing that we can actually project it as energetic images outside of us, which can become sometimes kind of disturbing initially for people. And so we're experiencing this landing place mostly as a place to get used to not having a body, but also it's sort of to also process, are there leftover emotions from your last life that are big and unresolved, and are there issues that are unresolved that you're not quite ready to enter the spirit world? You may go to bardos where there are certain other lessons that need to be learned, or some healing places where you need, or where healers help with our soul energy and help help us, essentially calm down from a difficult, overwhelming life. But when all that is done, then we can enter the afterlife, and the first step there is the life review, as many people have reported, which Jordan describes as kind of extraordinary, because he says that the life review isn't just seeing things that happened and choices you made, but it's experiencing them as you experience, but also as people around you who were affected by every choice. You experience as they experienced. And not only at that moment, but you experience it as they experienced it over time, how it affected them. So a father who slaps his son is experiencing it from his experience, from his son's experience, and then from his son's experience over time, and how that slap impacted his self-esteem and his sense of what to expect in relationships, and his fear and so forth. So the life review is this profound experience that goes on for a while, because there's a lot to look at, and we have to look at it from all experiences, ours and all the others who we were affecting.
How old was he when he died?
23.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
Has he re-experienced the death scene, the fight? Is that necessary for him to do?
He describes at great length what happened in that scene.
Yeah.
And at first he wasn't even aware he was dead. He was just very confused.
Wow.
But what he started to notice was when he wanted to move his body, he couldn't.
Hmm.
and that he couldn't make his muscles move. And then he started
Mhm.
that he was not looking at experience through his eyes. He was sort of above his body,
Uh-huh.
looking down. And he noticed that, and he went through quite a process of struggling to figure out, well, what has happened to me.
Wow.
And he went immediately to his house where his girlfriend, it was pretty late at night, his girlfriend was sleeping, um, and noticed, and then he went to us in the middle of the night and observed us, and was realizing that he could move around at will, and he was no longer connected to his body, and it was very disturbing to him for a
Yeah.
while.
Wow.
And so, yeah,
What?
so it was quite a transition.
Hmm.
Now, did he choose to be shot like that? I mean, was that a choice? Was it a consent? What?
That's a great question. He claims that most of us come to Earth with a sense of how long our life is going to be and
Uh-huh.
what sort of challenges we're going to face in our life. So we have some sense of that. Um, and he had a sense that we had a very short, he was going to have a relatively short life. There were things he was going to learn in this life. He was coming here for a purpose, but he was not going to have a long life. So he claims that, and he says that that's the case for many people. You know, before the 1700s, the average lifespan was 50% of children died at 5 or before.
Oh, wow.
And
Hmm.
so a short lifspan has not necessarily been unusual
Yeah.
for human creatures, and so in our era it is,
Mhm.
but actually many of us have come to Earth over many lifetimes for relatively short lives,
Mhm.
and that was the case for him.
Yeah, I've heard that said that from mystics that calling on spirits draws them to a lower realm and might disrupt their journey to higher realms. And so you should do this, have a serious purpose in mind. Do you agree with that, or does Jordan agree with that? He seems to come through quite a bit.
He totally disagrees.
Okay.
We couldn't disagree more. Here's
Okay.
here's something that's important is that once we leave our bodies, we can actually focus on multiple things at once. We can
Multitask.
we can
Yeah.
do multiple things at once. He can be talking to me, and he can be also in his soul group. He could be reading the Akashic record and reviewing something and learning something there. He could actually be engaging in tourism and beyond, observing life on another planet. He could be doing all kinds of things simultaneously. So
Huh.
the idea that we are usurping or monopolizing the attention
Right.
of loved ones, or somehow keeping them stuck on a lower level of a vibrational level, is completely false. What Ralph taught me, and what Jordan confirms over and over again, is that the loved ones are just a thought away. They're happy
Hmm.
to connect to us. As soon as we think about them, we are literally opening the channel. We don't realize that. We think of them and we feel grief, or we feel sadness, or we have these fond memories. But at the same time we're thinking of them, we're also opening the channel. We can begin to communicate with them at that very moment. And so
Hmm.
loved ones are connecting to us all the time. Jordan is, he tells me he's frequently just involved in just watching over me, even if I'm not aware of it.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, and I guess that leads to me, if I may offer one more thing, that the fundamental thing that he's taught me is that we remain connected to all the souls we love through, regardless of death. The love is still there. The connection is still there. It's there anytime we want it, and
Hmm.
it doesn't impact in any negative way the soul on the other side. They want to have that connection with us. They enjoy it. It's meaningful to them in the same way it's meaningful to us, because the love is what holds us together.
So you've done this for
So,
quite a while. Are you
Mhm.
able to make, sorry, Trish, are you able to make connections quicker now? How long does it take when you begin your meditation before you can make contact?
About 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
wow,
That's,
that's fantastic.
yeah. Okay.
Doesn't take
Well, now,
very.
has Jordan chosen his next life yet, or
He's
has he
already
given?
incarnated. He's already incarnated.
Okay.
Really?
He's
Yeah.
a he's a a girl. I think he's maybe about 12,
Huh.
11, 12, 13, something like that.
Have you
Uh,
run into him?
no, single mom. He's a different ethnicity than I am.
Huh.
And yeah, he has he projects to have a longer life in that lifetime.
What?
This is one of, if I may make one
Yeah,
of the,
sure. Go ahead.
is that we know that soul energy can exist both in the spirit world and inside of a body at the same time. That's why I can connect to Jordan in the spirit world, where he has all of this vast knowledge, while he's also incarnated, and part of his soul energy is now in the body of this young girl.
And can he be aware of her awareness in the same sense that we are currently aware of our awareness in our conversation here? And he can
we're very well aware of what's going on with her.
Wow.
And
but actually inside her rather than outside of her, or is that a separate awareness? I've always been curious, about that question.
Really an interesting question, and I'm not sure I know the answer.
Yeah.
His awareness is kind of observing, or it's literally joining and merging with her.
Because she's probably not aware of him, right? Probably not.
I don't think she's aware of him.
Not consciously, at least.
Now, true that as younger children are often
right.
As you know from Ian Stevenson, maybe in some of his
right.
But once they get past 8, they don't seem to retain that sense of their soul as being somehow separate from them.
Is he in a different country?
I think he's in the United States.
Huh.
Can I ask?
Go ahead, John.
So something that, and so this is going back a couple of minutes, but something you mentioned that I found interesting is because you said that in your contact with him that he can see multiple things. He's multitasking. I think that word came up. and so I think a lot of people would think, well, spirits move around like we do, but really this is just a merger and just an awareness more than when you start thinking about more than like when you talk about like poltergeist or something like that, where they're having a physical impact. This is more of a collective conscious that is being tapped into, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, there's a kind of this is really an important thing that you're bringing up. The collective consciousness, we're all part of. Jordan says we all are God. We're a part of collective consciousness of all of source, whatever we want to call it. But we also remain paradoxically individual souls with individual consciousness. So we're part of God. We can merge with God, but we're also individual souls, and that all creates these individual souls, us, actually to come to physical planets and other sort of dimensional experiences to learn. Our job is to learn, because God is continuing to evolve. God continues to grow and evolve and learn. And we are the main instrument through which he learns, these individual souls that come into a physical world. And the main thing that we're learning how to do is to love in the face of pain. There is no pain in the afterlife. Love is unearned. It's just there. We come here to learn how to love in the face of all the obstacles, all the friction, all the struggle, the physical and emotional pain. And learning how to love in the face of that is a huge lesson, and that all can only learn through us. So we have this sacred mission to come here and learn, and the pain we face is an unavoidable part and vehicle for all of that learning.
Yeah. Speaking of God, I was fascinated by Jordan's description of God. He suggests that all that is, or God, set the universe in motion, but doesn't exert control over the events of our lives, as many people believe. Rather than God's role is to observe and learn from everything that happens, as you were saying. So that certainly deflates the idea of God as all-knowing, perfect, a supreme being who helps us when we face life's challenges.
It's exactly his what he explains to me about God is it's very radically different from the God I grew up
Um,
with in the Catholic Church when I was a kid. That God was perfect; it had always existed from
mhm.
the beginning of time, um, and and had power and control over everything, um, and created everything. Now, Jordan's description. Oh, the other thing is that God judges. That God sends us here, and the
Right.
reason He sends us here find out if we're worthy of heaven, and if we're not, we go to hell. So that
Yeah.
God
Or
judges.
purgatory in the Catholic Church.
The churches, I think they got they
Oh,
didn't
they
get
got rid of limbo.
Limbo, yeah, for babies.
Yeah, right. Oh,
almost
we lost. Oh,
almost
I
everything that I learned is contradicted by what Jordan says. That God didn't is not always existed. He says that actually primal energy has always existed, but it was not conscious. But primal energy has the potential to evolve. It eventually becomes light, and then light becomes aware of itself. And as light
oh,
becomes aware of itself, it becomes conscious, and that is the beginning of God. The divine
huh.
is when light starts to become conscious. But consciousness evolved from primal energy, uh, which was not conscious. So God has not always existed. Then, yes, God creates the physical universe. God or the divine or all or the source creates the physical universe, but does it for a purpose. And the purpose is to learn. And it's like this is a kind of a silly analogy in some way, but it's one of George's. It says, look, let's say a dad makes a playhouse for a kid. Well, he can't actually get in the playhouse. He's too big to get in that. He has to send the kid into the playhouse to actually experience what it's like in there.
Right.
And he has
It's a
to,
good analogy.
and for example, grief. God can't experience grief because God doesn't lose anything. Uh, and so God can only learn about grief and the experience of grief and loss and impermanence through us, through our
Hmm.
experience. So we come here and lose things, and things are taken from us, and we experience this profound grief. And that only way God can learn about that, and the only way God could learn how to love in the face of loss and grief, is through us. So that's why we come that's why the universe is created.
Hmm.
Come in here to learn and to teach, and for God to take everything we learn and upload it.
I like that much better than Catholicism.
well, and so really we are living in a simulation,
Yeah.
basically, because and pretty maybe a crude analogy, but I mean, yeah, when I play a video game, I'm trying to experience somebody else's life, and gather something from it. It's an interactive, interactive movie in some cases. But at any rate, point being is that it is kind of, in some respect, it is a simulation, and that it is a conduit for that collective conscious to learn through experiences within the simulation.
Well, it is invented. You're right. I mean, it's invented for our for consciousness to interact with it and learn from the physical universe. Now, what he says, for whatever it's worth, that consciousness, so there's just all there is energy, and then there's light. Then there's light that's aware of itself, and that's the beginning of God or source. But what we do know is this: that consciousness has the power to raise energy above the threshold of visibility to particle form. Um,
Huh.
and we know that with quantum physics tells
Hmm.
us that consciousness can change what physical energy does or physical matter does. Um, uh, and so what he says, Jordan says, is that consciousness can raise energy above the threshold of visibility to particle form, and then this becomes the building blocks of the physical universe. But consciousness is the source of that, the consciousness of all, or God, whatever you want to call it. is what manipulates energy to make it rise to the level where it can be seen.
Has he given you any indication why he chose to become back as a girl?
No, he's never.
I'm always curious about the change in genders and how that.
Well, yeah, that's a really interesting question that I don't think I know the answer to. I mean, he wanted to sort of come back as somebody who was on the downside of power. Uh,
Huh.
and and so he has indicated that part of his role um, is to fight for equity in some way
Huh.
and to engage um, in an effort to change conscious awareness about
Uh,
equity. And so I think coming from that world in order to learn about it.
Yeah, that could lead to the question about good and evil. So how does he look at that matter?
Yeah, see, he doesn't think that there's anything such thing as good or evil.
Okay.
Interesting.
There's no judgment. We go to the afterlife. No matter what we did, we go to the afterlife.
Uh,
We just learn have an incredible amount of learning to do about the choices we made and how that affected people and so forth. But he doesn't see that there is any evil. I mean, the way he kind of looks at it is that love is the connective tissue or the gravitational force that holds everything together, and anything that involves disconnection is kind of the opposite of love. It's not evil. It's just the opposite of love. It just pulls us apart. Um,
how
and
do you
we
explain something like Hitler?
well,
You know,
and
I'd be curious to talk to Jordan about this. Get him down here.
well, there have been a lot of people on. Obviously that was a massive scale
Uh-huh.
or if you want to call it evil, but of disconnection. There's a
Right.
Right.
massive.
So he probably didn't come into this life with that as a goal, that from the spirit world, that I'm going to go and kill 7 million people or whatever.
But he came in
I,
as a spirit with a lot of power.
yeah.
Mhm.
He had a lot of power. And one of the things I learned in the Catholic Church is that the difference between a saint and a sinner isn't that much.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Saints have a lot of power, and people who create a lot of disruption and pain in the world often have a lot of power, and so it's just how they direct that power and what they
Mhm.
for that actually is the main difference. Um, and basically, saints use their power for service, and sinners use the power for self edification
Mhm.
and ego gratification. Um, it's kind of just how you use the power. But people with a lot of power can do great things for very unfortunate people.
Yeah. Has Jordan given you any sense of how soon a soul can be reborn? I mean, is it your choice as a
Yes,
soul?
it is your choice. And there's some interesting information about that comes from Michael Newton. The fellow that
Uh-huh.
various souls who he did 7,000 life between life regressions before
Hmm.
he wrote any of his books. So all these people were very naive about what the world and the afterlife was, and they all describe very much the same thing. But one of the things they describe is that there's some kind of circle where we go and choose our next life, and some people souls will go and decide that they want to reincarnate very quickly, and sometimes that doesn't work out very well because they haven't fully processed the lesson
Uh-huh.
of their last life. So I mean, there seems to be some sort of optimal time. You have to take some time to really digest what you learned from that last life, not just
Uh-huh.
life review, but you go to the Akashic record. One of the cool things about the Akashic record is that you can go and you can see what would have happened if you had chosen X instead of Y. And so, and it literally opens a chapter, and you can see a whole set of events that are a consequence of a different alternative choice you might have made. And then when you can close that like you close the chapter of a book and it ceases to.
Uh-huh.
But so we can learn all kinds of things about what if I had done this and what if I had done that. So
Right.
that goes on. in the afterlife. So there's just a huge amount of learning that goes on. And sometimes if we jump back into our next life without having completed some of that,
Uh-huh.
we may show up without some of the awareness that we need to live effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the other hand, there are some souls that are very reluctant to incarnate. They've had tough lives. Maybe they've gone through a whole sequence of existences, incarnate existences that have been extremely challenging and painful. And they may wait a long time before they're ready. And some souls choose not to incarnate. In fact, they reach a point where they no longer want to do that.
So you have that choice.
There's our choice.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So a question I've had when sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m. and think some crazy thoughts is, but where does consciousness come from? I mean, if God created all that is created, everything, does all that is that this consciousness, did this consciousness also have a higher self that created it?
He says something different from that. He says,
Okay.
there's the dark void, there's the emptiness. But in
Okay.
the dark void, he says, is primal energy, which is just potential. It's just
Oh, interesting.
the way he describes it is, imagine you're at a station waiting for a train, and the concept of train is just potential. It hasn't shown up.
Uh-oh.
Just potential energy that has yet to actually be expressed and present. So primal energy is that. It's just potential. And eventually, but what he claims about energy is that it has the power to evolve. And so primal energy, which is really just energy without any object, any literal force, begins to evolve, and it starts to evolve and eventually evolves into light, and then a light evolves, as he said, in consciousness. So the divine or God or all ultimately comes out of primal energy, which has always existed inside the dark void.
And so primal energy existed before consciousness?
According to Jordan.
Okay.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it's
Well, now,
it's a closed system, right? I mean, it's not like there's any more being made. It's just literally being recycled to some extent, right?
what is?
That primal energy, it can change forms, but it's not like there's anything being added to it. It just is being reused for other purposes. It's a closed system. You can't create any more of it.
That's quite possible.
Mhm.
I don't that I need to check in Jordan, but I'm laughing. Kind of a really good question.
Well, I mean, and it's kind of what, it's kind of what our physics are based on, is that, it's just, that thing that there's transformation, but there's no, you can't, what is, I guess one way of putting it.
Observation of matter and energy.
But infinity goes on and on outside of any closed system, doesn't it?
Sure,
we obviously need to talk to Jordan here.
That's the void. That's the void, and this is something that exists inside the void.
Okay, all right.
It does. It exists inside the void. But what he does suggest is that the void continues to fill with consciousness. It becomes, light and consciousness moves further and further into the void.
Expansion, yeah.
Expands into the void. Now, whether there's more energy or whether it diffuses in some way to fill the void, I don't know. But it's
here's a question that Trish might ask, but I'll ask for her.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you do this meditation and for connecting to higher realms and contact your deceased dogs?
Or cats. Or birds.
Just give a little bit of a complicated answer to that. Jordan claims, and I don't know, I mean, I know nothing other than what he says here, is that just normal, animals that just live out in the world, their consciousness gets recycled back into the whole, and then gets sent into other animal forms. But their memory of that life doesn't continue. Their identity doesn't. Consciousness is recycled. But he says that in many cases, animals that were pets, their vibrational level rises to a point where they can show up in the afterlife. They can be present in the afterlife, and a lot of mediums will report that they pets that are associated with a particular soul in the afterlife. So, in terms of animals, my understanding is that an animal that has a very strong relationship to a human, their vibrational level is altered in such a way that they may actually continue in some form in the afterlife. Now, there's another issue here also, though, could you have contact with that animal? I don't know. Could you communicate with that animal? Since the animal doesn't necessarily know language, I'm not sure what you would get. Maybe you'd get pictures or images. But the other thing is that we have a choice. We don't not only can we connect to souls who are deceased and are in the spirit world, or we can connect to all too. We can, we've been doing that from the beginning of time with prayer. But of course, you can connect to all using channeling, by asking questions and getting answers. So we can channel to all. We can channel to souls in the afterlife, but we can also channel to our own soul, our own higher self. And so it's called a deep knowledge meditation. It's basically, it's very similar to what I just described in terms of channeling. It's actually connecting to our soul that remains always in the afterlife. Remember, our soul energy divides. Some stays there always, enters the body. So we can connect to our soul energy. It has all of this knowledge, these past lives, and all that it's learned. And so it's a relatively simple meditation. It's very similar to channeling, to actually ask questions of our soul. And I teach a class on psychotherapy and spirituality, and that's by far in the class the favorite meditation is the meditation that connects, where we can connect to our own soul, our own higher self.
So that's like tapping into your own Akashic records through your own efforts, in a sense, right?
Yes, I guess you could say that, because you're tapping into the knowledge of those past lives and the wisdom of those past lives, and you're not necessarily, your soul and spirit is not necessarily going to tell you, well, now in this, you're a Roman centurion, and blah, blah, blah. But it has the knowledge and the wisdom of those experiences that it can bring to bear on your struggles and questions.
Yeah, that would be an interesting class, taking class from you like that. But unfortunately, I don't think a class like that could be taught in one of the universities in Florida, because that would be seen as the devil's work, probably, by our governor.
You'd have to be channeling the 10 Commandments or something.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Which is Judaic in origin, not Christian, actually.
Yes, exactly. That's interesting with Alabama. It's like
yeah, right. They're saying it's Christian.
Yeah. Was it Alabama or no, it was Louisiana.
No, Louisiana.
Yeah. Matt, okay. I had a question. It just went out of my head. Darn. Oh, okay. Do animals ever reincarnate as people? Has Jordan mentioned that?
Absolutely not.
No? Okay. That's too bad.
Not only Jordan, but, if you look at, again, Michael Newton's work, with all these 7,000 people that he helped to explore their own particular experience in the afterlife, there's not any interaction between humans becoming animals becoming human. That whole idea that we incarnate as a cockroach or something is completely wrong. Yeah. And the reason why it's wrong, we're here to learn. and so you have to have a certain level of consciousness to learn
Uh-huh.
and retain your experiences. Um, and so, the level of cockroach consciousness is not sufficient for that mission. There's souls incarnating in all kinds of different planets, in all kinds of different physical forms, all kinds of species, and some of them not even carbon based and so forth. So all kinds of creatures that souls inhabit as
Uh-huh.
learning experience. But all these creatures have had to evolve to a level where they are capable of conceptual thought,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and because only when you're capable of conceptual thought is is all going to send souls to
Right.
it.
Yeah. We've had a number of golden retrievers, and we've always thought they had like fragmentary human consciousness in them because there's something in them that seems to be have a higher awareness than a normal dog. I don't know. That's our
That may
experience.
just be us.
Well, I wouldn't be at all surprised that when you get up to the afterlife, they're up there with you. So I mean,
Yeah. So the
Mm.
golden retriever just stood up and walked away when I said that. Now he's coming back.
And it is kind of funny that we were all I
There
mean,
he is.
not haha funny, but it is interesting that we were talking about my previous dog Tyler, who
Tyler,
yeah, I mean, yeah, I was telling Trish and Rob that was my tribute to him when I had to he got cancer and had to put him down, and my tribute to him was the quote from Star Trek 2 at Spock's funeral. Kirk says, out of amongst all my travels, out of all the souls that I met through my travels, his soul was the most human. And yeah, so
All right. Yeah.
that fits Spock for sure.
and Tyler, as it turns
Yeah,
out.
I'm sure.
So instead of going from dogs and pets, how about alien consciousness? What does Jordan have to say about that and the existence and the relationship to all that is?
well, I mean, from my understanding, we incarnate on. I have no idea how many planets, but
Mhm.
they're in huge number of planets, and there's a huge number of souls that are incarnating on these planets, and so of course there are aliens. There
Yeah.
are creatures on these other planets who have conceptual abilities, who have consciousness that's evolved to the point, um, just as our consciousness evolved to the
Mhm.
where we were able to process life in a way that we could learn from it, and that all could benefit from what we
Uh-huh.
learn. So they're all over the place, and this makes perfect sense that periodically they show up here in some form or another. I mean, I, I, but it also seems to be, for whatever reason, that they don't get involved in our planet or try to manipulate it in any way. And that's sort of surprising to me, because you'd think that there'd be some species on some planets that would evolve, um, you know, to be very exploitive, and would
Like we're going to take over Earth, that type of thing.
we're going to start a mining operation on Earth, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of good
Yeah.
materials there. So I don't know, but what's apparent is that so far, at least as much as we know, when and if aliens are showing up, they're not doing anything to impact. They're just observing, as far as we,
Or they probably would have done it by now.
or they would have done it by now.
Yeah. Right.
Matt, had you and Jordan been together before in other lives, do you think?
Yeah, no. When Ralph did basically a past life and life between life hypnosis with me, uh, the immediate path, what you do when you do a past, well, life between life
Hmm.
is you go into the most immediate past life, typically
Right.
then you progress to death in that past life, and then you pop into the life between lives. And in that past life, Jordan was my wife. So and it was
Huh.
interesting to have this sense of him as being a completely different gender, and also, yeah, a fundamentally different relationship. And
Mm.
it was a little uncomfortable when I first. It's like, what, you know? And in that life, my dad in this life was my brother in that life. And
See, this kind of goes along with Carol Bowman's book, Return from Heaven, where she specifically talks about, uh, kids that have been with their parents before, kids who died, but they've been before with in the same family, you know.
and that's not atypical, I think. But we're a little repertory company. Our soul group and related and associated soul groups, we incarnate a lot together, and we will incarnate in different relationships.
Uh-huh.
In one incarnation, we may be, and there may be antipathy, or we're struggling with that soul. And in another incarnation, they're our brother. And in our other incarnation, there are one of our they're our partner. And so in each of these incarnations, we may have very different
Right.
relationships. And so it's not at all surprising that a person, like Jordan in that life was
Uh-huh.
another life, he was a unrequited love, and in another life we were in a yeshiva together in the Middle Ages,
Huh.
and
Oh.
he was a an old, uh, he was really an old guy, and I was a young buck, and that
Hmm.
he was sort of my mentor. um, and so we've had as I understand,
Uh-huh.
different lives together, but um, and at least in that life, when he died, uh, we were communicating back and forth
Hmm.
uh, through that, some sort of channeling medium, and I guess we decided to do it again this life.
Huh.
Hmm.
Well, this is interesting because when I was pregnant with our daughter, I asked specifically for a dream, what life have we shared? And I dreamed I was in a warehouse. My water broke. She was born. I picked her up and her eyes opened. She said, Iceland. I thought, Iceland? My God. For 18 years, I could not figure that out. And finally, she went to a medium, and we have eventually met the woman. And she said, oh, that was a life. She went to trance. That was a life in like the Finnish Norwegian countries. And she was your aunt. You and Rob were siblings, and your parents had died, and she took you in. And the woman says, and this is her payback life.
She's You're going to take her instead of her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what does Jordan say about time? Are all these lives existing simultaneously now in the ever-present now, or how does that work? Is
It's such a paradox that
yeah.
it's hard for me to wrap my mind around. And this is an example that's so outside of my experience that I can't really comprehend it. But what he claims is that from the spirit world, we can see the entire timeline of the universe,
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Big Bang to whenever it comes to an end. Um, and that also we can see the entire timeline of the Earth. We can see the entire timeline of our species on the Earth. So we can literally see how events unfold. So the future and the past exists on some level simultaneously
Hmm.
in the
Hmm.
app. However, what's really paradoxical is that when we enter that timeline at some point, and by the way, we can enter the timeline at different places. We could enter in the Stone Age. We could choose to enter in the Stone Age, or enter in our next life in 2025. I mean, 25. Um,
Hmm.
well into the future. Now, souls don't usually do that. They usually enter sequentially because it's too disruptive to try to jump too far ahead or too far behind.
Hmm.
But it's possible. We could enter the timeline as long as the species of human Homo sapiens
Yes.
evolved enough for us to have
Uh-huh.
thought, we could jump in at any time.
Yeah.
But here's the paradox, though. Wherever we jump in, we potentially could change the future.
Oh, I
Even
like that.
Yeah.
the past exists at the same time. If we jump in, we could make certain choices that would literally change how things evolve. I mean, for example, the Earth is on a certain trajectory now in terms of what we're doing to the climate and
Mhm.
environment. But it's also true that souls living now or in the near future could make certain changes that would actually literally change the future as it exists, even though the future is already set on some level.
Jeez.
We're, so, and that's true of our own lives. When we come, so that circle of choice where we choose a life, we can see how that life is more or less going to turn out. But the longer we live in that life and the more choices we make, the more we can alter the future that we saw or was like
Wow.
we chose that.
So time is malleable in a sense.
Well,
It's malleable. Exactly.
Uh-huh.
well, and I think there's a reason that Apple calls their backup feature on Mac OS Time Machine, because
Yeah.
it is a cosmic it is a cosmic backup that I think on some level. So.
Right.
Interesting.
So Matthew, do you have a new book you're working on, or what's coming up for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the book, Lessons from the Afterlife was just really what's the purpose of the physical universe? Why are we here? Why do we show up on these planets? So it's all about, why does what we experience as this life exist? What is?
Mhm.
He just finished another book, and it's really about soul freedom. It's about how to act, have freedom, true freedom of choice.
Mhm.
Where does that freedom come from, and how it's derived, and how do we push beyond the demands of our body, of our ego, of the pain and pleasure that we deal with in this life? How do we push beyond all the ways those things demand and determine our choices to be able to make really free will choices?
Is he dictating this book to you?
Yeah, he did.
Is
We
it
wrote it together.
okay?
He wrote half of it, and I wrote half of it. And
Okay.
Okay, now is his female body aware of this, do you think?
not at all.
No, so it's
No.
totally interesting.
Yeah.
Just Jordan in the spirit world.
Right.
So when you're communicating with him and writing things down, is it similar to automatic writing? But automatic writing, I think, the hand moves, but you're not really aware of you seem to be more aware consciously of what's going on.
I'm having thought
Yeah, right.
channeled from him,
Mhm.
and it makes sense too that we communicate that way because in the spirit world, people aren't talking, they're not moving their lips, they're not
Right.
Yeah.
through an atmosphere that vibrates and creates sound. It's all telepathic, and that's how souls in the afterlife communicate to us. It's telepathically, and so they send thoughts to us. They can send dreams to us. They send
I have
recommendations.
a question for Jordan. Ask him if Carl Jung has been reborn. I'm really curious about that. And if so, what is he now?
I'll check in with him.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
I appreciate that.
Well, I have one more question. We're coming to the end of our hour now. You channel any other beings on the other side besides Jordan, and is it more challenging for you if you do, is it more challenging for you to communicate with them?
I talked to my dad a little bit,
Uh-huh.
and a little bit to my mom. I do sometimes channel my own soul that's in the afterlife.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Need some advice, although I tend to get better advice from Jordan than I get from
Mhm.
my oh, maybe I'm not as developed as he is. It's quite possible. And so, but that's kind of the extent of it. I don't try to. I guess I mostly communicate to entities that I know, and I have a relationship with, and that relationship is an actual experience of love.
Yeah.
Other people will communicate to, and I know people who communicate to guides who they met, who are not part of their life here, and yet they have a very strong sense of who that guide is, and get a lot of support and guidance from them. So
has he communicated to you, or have you asked how long you're going to be on this earth, this life?
No, I don't ask. And the other thing is, souls are not usually permitted to give us any sense of the future.
Yeah, I remember years ago, decades ago now, actually, a medium told Trish that she would live until 73, and so we had like a little celebration when she became 74. She passed that.
We made it.
Yeah, well, and so they're really encouraged, and I almost might say prohibited from telling us about the future, because it starts taking away our free will.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't. It's not. I don't think it's a good idea to know that.
No.
It would pollute the simulation. It would pollute the experiment.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, the next time we'd love to have you back on. I could sit and talk about this all day long. But please let us know when you've got another book, or Jordan has given you some shocking information that you'd like to share with everybody.
Yeah.
The original book, Seeking Jordan, is coming out again. It's being reissued by.
Oh, good.
Okay, we'll take a look. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming on.
This has been great.
Great having you.
When is this one going up, John?
As far as I know, 2 weeks from today.
2 weeks. Okay, we'll send you the link, Matt.
I just so enjoyed talking to all three.
Oh, this has been great. I love this.
Been fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Bye now.